Jeffrey Epstein Case, 2024 to 2025 Update. Ghislaine Maxwell and related criminal appeals. Ghislaine Maxwell, Epstein's longtime associate, remains in federal custody serving a 20-year sentence after her 2021 New York conviction for sex trafficking. In late 2024, her appeals efforts faltered. On September 17, a three-judge panel of the Second U.S. Circuit Court upheld her conviction on all counts, and on November 25, the full Second Circuit denied her bid for an en banc rehearing. Attorneys for Maxwell immediately signaled they would petition the U.S. Supreme Court to review the case, raising, among other issues, claims that Epstein's 2007 non-prosecution agreement should have barred her prosecution. Maxwell formally asked the Supreme Court to hear her appeal in April 2025, arguing, as before, that she had relied on that earlier immunity deal. Maxwell plans to appeal to the U.S. Supreme Court, though the High Court is not obligated to take up the case. For context, Maxwell was convicted on 5 counts in 2021 for recruiting and grooming underage girls for Epstein's abuse. She remains incarcerated at a low-security federal prison in Florida, with release eligibility not until 2037. No other major new criminal indictments of Epstein associates have emerged. In Europe, former associate Jean-Luc Brunel died in a French jail in 2022 before trial. Thus, Maxwell's appeal to the Supreme Court is the primary active criminal proceeding against a core Epstein collaborator. Her case has drawn continued attention from both survivors and the press as it works its way through the appellate system. Civil lawsuits and settlements involving victims. Epstein's victims and their advocates have pursued numerous civil claims. Notable settlements have already been paid, and new litigation continues. For example, Epstein's estate established an independent victims' compensation fund after his death, which paid about $121 million to roughly 138 claimants by mid-2021. Those who rejected the fund's offers or were ineligible were left free to sue the estate or others. Beyond the estate's program, survivors have sued third parties. In mid-2023, Jane Doe 1, a former Epstein victim, led a class action lawsuit against JPMorgan Chase, alleging the bank knowingly facilitated Epstein's trafficking. That lawsuit secured a $290 million settlement with JPMorgan, pending court approval. Deutsche Bank similarly agreed in 2023 to pay $75 million to settle related claims. Other banks, including claims by the U.S. Virgin Islands, remain in litigation or negotiation. Victims have also targeted individuals who allegedly enabled Epstein. In August 2024, a federal judge allowed a proposed class action to proceed against Epstein's longtime lawyer, Darren Dyke, and accountant, Richard Kahn, ruling that victims could sue them for aiding and abetting the trafficking. That case is currently on hold pending a further class certification process, because some victims signed releases when accepting estate payments. In spring 2024, one of Epstein's former accusers sued Henry Uretsky, a prominent retired psychiatrist linked to Epstein, alleging he abused her and enabled Epstein's crimes. Uretsky denied wrongdoing, and the plaintiff ultimately dismissed that suit with prejudice in April 2025. Other notable civil actions include FBI cover-up suit. In February 2024, a group of a dozen survivors sued the U.S. federal government, accusing the FBI of negligence and covering up Epstein's trafficking by ignoring tips and halting probes. That case seeks damages against the U.S. and quotes testimony from a late 2023 Senate Judiciary hearing in which FBI Director Christopher Wray was questioned about the Bureau's failures. USVI official misconduct suit. Advocates report that survivors have also filed claims against current and former officials in the U.S. Virgin Islands, where Epstein owned property, alleging local law enforcement turned a blind eye. Prince Andrew/UK settlement. In 2022, Virginia Giuffre, a key Epstein accuser, settled her UK lawsuit against Prince Andrew for an undisclosed multimillion-dollar sum. The terms were confidential, but reports noted Andrew also agreed to make payments to a charity for trafficking victims as part of the deal. Giuffre had alleged she was trafficked to Andrew as a minor. Andrew denies wrongdoing. In sum, survivors' civil claims have yielded hundreds of millions of dollars via the estate fund and bank settlements. Yet many victims continue to press claims in court against individuals, banks, and government entities they say enabled Epstein's abuse. Government and judicial actions on Epstein materials. Judges and officials have taken steps to unseal and release documents from Epstein-related cases. In early January 2024, Senior U.S. District Judge Loretta Prescott began publicly unsealing hundreds of pages of court records from a 2015 civil lawsuit involving Epstein. These John Doe depositions and exhibits named some 153 people connected in various ways to Epstein's sex trafficking network. Judge Prescott explicitly noted that merely appearing in the documents did not imply any wrongdoing, since many names were incidental or peripheral. The newly released filings gave media outlets a first look at dozens of prominent names: former Presidents Bill Clinton and Donald Trump, Prince Andrew, actor Kevin Spacey, and others, who had surfaced in Epstein circles. Most of the individuals mentioned had already denied any improper conduct or involvement. Separately, the U.S. Justice Department, under an executive push for transparency, posted declassified Epstein case files online in February 2025. Attorney General Pam Bondi announced the release of a first batch of FBI and DOJ records, including flight logs and personal contact books. In practice, journalists found these records added little new information beyond what was already public. Bondi's release triggered scrutiny. A group of House Democrats, June 2025, demanded answers after a political advisor alleged that President Trump's name was being withheld in Epstein files. Representative investigations have also been active. Senate Finance Committee Ranking Member Ron Wyden, D.O.R., is probing the financing of Epstein's operations and seeking Treasury and DOJ documents related to his wealthy backers. In March 2025, Wyden released a 2019 settlement showing financier Leon Black paid $62 million to the U.S. Virgin Islands in part to fund Epstein's activities, and he has formally requested further federal records to lift the veil on Epstein's sources of funding. In summary, courts and Congress have pushed for transparency. Federal judges have ordered the unsealing of sealed documents, and Congress has held hearings and written letters pressing the FBI/DOJ to turn over remaining files. Media reporting notes that thousands of pages related to Epstein have now been released through courts and FOIA requests, though significant redactions remain in many releases. Advocacy organizations and survivor statements. Victim advocate groups and survivors' representatives have actively commented on these developments. For example, Where Hope Lives, a Phoenix-based trafficking recovery nonprofit, issued a press statement applauding Judge Prescott's decision to release the John Doe names, calling it a step in the right direction on the side of victims. The organization emphasized that Epstein's case underscores the broader scale of human trafficking and urged continued support and resources for survivors. Similarly, attorneys who have represented Epstein's victims have stressed that the fight is ongoing. Attorney Sigrid McCauley, who represents many survivors, said in mid-2024 that victims' story is not over, and that many others beyond Epstein and Maxwell aided the trafficking operation. Survivors themselves have spoken out as well. The family of Virginia Giuffre, an outspoken accuser, remembered her after her 2025 death as a fierce warrior whose courage pushed lawyers to fight harder for other victims. McCauley said Giuffre was much more than a client, an incredible champion for other victims whose strength was awe-inspiring. Giuffre's U.S. and Australian family had noted before that she spent her life working to expose abuse and help others. In general, survivors and advocacy groups continue to call for full accountability, urging that anyone who enabled Epstein, regardless of their status, be investigated. Recent developments, 2025. Recent months have seen several new developments. Document releases. In January 2024, the first wave of sealed civil deposition files was unsealed by Judge Prescott, and more releases, totaling thousands of pages, continued thereafter. In February 2025, the DOJ published a Phase 1 batch of declassified Epstein records on its website, though those contained largely previously known material. Government officials have signaled that additional records, if any exist, must still be produced to Congress and oversight bodies. Maxwell appeal. In April 2025, Maxwell filed her petition to the Supreme Court. Her lawyers reiterate arguments about the 2007 non-prosecution agreement, but the court has not yet agreed to review the case. Victim lawsuits. In April 2025, a key civil case against psychiatrist Henry Uretsky was voluntarily dismissed with prejudice, meaning that claim will not proceed. Meanwhile, other victim suits remain active. For instance, a Virgin Islands lawsuit against JPMorgan is ongoing, seeking to hold the bank accountable, and proposed class action against Indike/Con still awaits certification. Advocacy and impact. On April 25, 2025, Virginia Giuffre, Epstein's most prominent accuser and a noted advocate for survivors, died by suicide at age 41. Her family and attorneys issued statements mourning her loss as a heroic fighter for victims. Giuffre's death prompted renewed attention to the mental health toll on abuse survivors and calls from advocacy groups for more support and justice. In sum, as of mid-2025, the Epstein case continues to evolve through appeals and litigation. Courts have kept the story in the public eye by releasing long-sealed records. Survivors' attorneys and organizations keep pressing for accountability of Epstein's enablers. Congressional and government inquiries, including DOJ orders and Senate probes, are also seeking to lift the veil on the full extent of Epstein's network and finances. All parties, from jailed defendants to advocacy groups, expect these efforts to continue, and no significant part of the Epstein saga is yet fully concluded.